Cats. My name is Kate from Kitty Cat Gaming, and we are in a game called A Case of Distrust. Now, I saw this, and it says it was a mystery game, and I love mystery things, because, you know, I'm all about that Sherlock Holmes kind of stuff, so I love it. And this is a narrative mystery from 1924 San Francisco. You play as a private investigator, Phyllis Candace Malone, in his historical 2D adventure game. You explore the underground speakeasies, smoke-filled billiard halls, classic barbershops, and, you know, there's more. You have to catch the suspect that lies in the evidence, statements, and your wits. So, yeah. I thought that this, you know, you obviously have to uncover the truth, but, you know, I thought that this looked so much fun, so let's get started. I'm excited. I woke in my desk chair. Across from me were his piercing amber eyes. They surprised me at first, but I should have known he'd be there. I stretched and said, mid-yawn, not very nice to sneak into a sleeping woman's apartment. But his stare just continued. I'd laugh at his glare. I cursed the open window. He snuck in through my window. I'm gonna curse at it. I cursed the open window. Of course, that's how he entered. I'd hoped to finally rest my eyes a while, but fate often disagrees with me. I knew I didn't have what he wanted. Reaching into my coat, I took out my knife and flicked it open. I gave him the knife. I held the knife steady. I held the knife steady while staring back at him. Look, I said, nodding towards the desk. That's all there is. Take it or leave it. But a detective knows when she's beat, and I knew then he wanted to search the place. And that's what he would do. I sighed, knowing my weakness for his type. Alright, I said, let's look. He let out a graceful meow in victory. I cut a piece of my apple that cat had just rejected. Always the sore winner, I jabbed. But I was smiling too, because I was telling the truth. There was absolutely no other food in my apartment. The cat often dropped by to scavenge. He made a lot of noise when he thought I was holding out on him, but right now the place was clean, empty, no food anywhere. I had to prove it to him. That cat had waltzed into my apartment a few years earlier. Shush. I'm recording. I don't have time for friends. I didn't even think I had friends. He kept coming back, though there was rarely a morsel to eat. He'd continue his loud meowing until I proved to him that the place was empty of food. The lamp had belonged to my Uncle Lewis. He'd been an SFPD officer, one who argued policewomen could be good detectives, even while the others jeered at me. I knew he'd been right, but my current workload didn't help that claim. I tried not to think about Lewis. I was lousy at handling the emotions behind his thoughts. Yeah, me too. Packaged cigarettes were the latest trend, but I still preferred to roll my own. The ashtray was evidence that it was a practiced skill. I suppose I had a lot of free time back then. I kept a small statue underneath the side table. It had been police evidence in a crime, and its owner hadn't wanted it back. It took a shine to it, so I snagged it for myself on my way out of the department. I had taken copies of old murder cases from the SFPD records when I'd left. I loved reading through them, even though my own contributions were minimal. At that time, I longed for those types of jobs. The truth was, any work was hard to find for a female detective. Yeah, back in those days, nobody really wanted anything to do with a female. I can tell you that. My old notebook, now filled to the brim. I wrote everything down, even the minor details. Never know what can be useful. The first half had my old cases, details from the beats I used to walk in my policewoman days. Of course, policewomen were forbidden from going on patrol, but Lewis often overlooked that rule. Oh, I wanted to read what the second one said. A newspaper was flopped on the floor. Its headline about the death of Lenin, leader of the Red Menace, sleeping Russia, seemed the Bolsheviks had lost their head. How'd they now? The regular white icebox, tinged yellow with age, half blocked the kitchen doorway. My income rarely kept much stocked in it, and right now it was empty. We're gonna talk. It doesn't matter how doe-eyed you are, cutie pie. We've got no food around, I told him. He licked his chops and looked at me. Apparently he still didn't believe that. I needed to contradict him somehow. To show him something in the apartment that would prove it was empty of food. Case summary. There was no case just then, but the cat was meowing and needed attention. I had to contradict the cat by first talking to him, then pointing to a piece of evidence in my notebook that proved the apartment was empty of food. Show the cat there's no food. Home. Paper stack, desk lamp, ashtray, statue, newspaper, notebook, icebox. Okay, so I need to find something to show him. How about the icebox? The icebox would be good, right? I went back to the apartment to search for clues that I could show him. I like this. This is really cool. Show him this, that there's nothing in it. Okay, first things first, I don't like how slow my mouse is. I probably should have made this regular white icebox, tinged yellow with age, half blocked, it's empty. Probably should have made it a little bit. Used to contradict. I opened the icebox so the cat could see inside. Empty, I told him. The cat looked quizzically at the open door, then back at me. Sorry, fella, there's no grub in there for me either. He stared at me with eyes as disappointed as I felt. Those big yellows always got to my soul. Thoughts of my family filled my head. My sister, my parents. My parents were still in Chicago, where they'd moved our family in my final year of schooling. I'd returned to California, but they maintained that there were better job prospects for my father in Chicago. His alcoholism had cost him his job and nearly his life. He'd attempted a clean start many times, but even the Vollicid act couldn't to pry open the grip that Gin had on him. My mother stuck by him, whether for her godliness or her stubbornness. I never knew. I always thought her berating only chased him to this beakiness. But it was the only way she'd known to love him. Most of their money came from my late grandmother's trust. But those funds were barely a trickle. I often dreamed of saving enough to help them. My mind scrolled into the usual series of questions. Had I even impacted the women's movement? Had I made my change on society at all? Was my plodding career worth losing traditional happiness? What was the point in the life I had chosen? A loud meow from the cat snapped my thoughts back into the moment. I took a deep breath and grinned back at him. Guess you can scram now, I said. Nobody's going to come knocking with food for you, fella. There immediately came a banging on the front door. Beyond a nuisance, this cat was psychic too. You order out? I asked him. In the doorway was a regrettably familiar face of Connor Green. His company churned my stomach. I stared past him. His company churned my stomach. His company churned my stomach. It might have been his Bergamot perfume, which hung around my nostrils like a lingering unwanted guest, or that sordid smile, which was forever plastered on his face. He stared at me through the doorway with a coy smile. Well, ain't you gonna invite me inside? I don't want to let him in because that's just... I don't know who he is. I don't know anything about him. I started closing the door. I started closing the door, but he snuck out a foot to stop me. Hey now, he said. Foul way to treat a customer, Malone. So that was his angle, hiring me as a detective. I wondered what a bootlegger would need with a private eye, but he answered without my prompt. I'll make this quick. I can't take this to the hog house, or the pigs would laugh me out. And the other dicks just aren't as tempting. His grin widened. Thought this was gonna be quick, I said, and I started rolling a cigarette. It wasn't quick, and I'd already rolled and lighted a second smoke. When Grin finally finished his story, I noted the important bits in my book. It had started with a letter slipped under his door in a white envelope. The envelope contained a single typewritten leaf, which he handed to me. It read, "End your game, or we'll end you." It had no signature, instead ending with only a small scribble in the bottom right corner that resembled a black hand. Green had a lead on a new rum running scheme, a connection from Vancouver. He'd given a sample to Tiny Paul, the gangster who ran the Tin Spoon speakeasy for mob boss Jerry Fry. I'm gonna say Fry. They agreed to buy in for more. Green surmised the letter was about his rum running. He suspected Redstone Stable, another bootlegger, of sending the letter. He told me that Stable ran a barber shop during the day and gave me the address. Green needed to know who the threat was from. He'd get Paul's gang to deal with them and continue his scheme to get rich. If I go snooping myself, he concluded. Folks see I'm not trusting people. No trust leads to no customers. I need to pay a low key, which is where you come in. I raised an eyebrow and stared at him through the cigarette smoke. Something in his yarn was still twisted. Sorry. He must have noticed my reticence, because he said, "You know I worked closely with Lewis. I'm sure he'd want to protect me as much as any other victim." My uncle. Lewis had put me on the force. I'd finally accepted Lewis's death. I will still search for answers. I was still searching for answers. My uncle. I was still searching for answers after his death. He'd been a man obsessed with helping victims and bringing justice to those beyond salvation. With that eons, I never understood how he could have taken his own life. Those thoughts haunted me. I'd quit the SFPD and started my own practice. Taking his philosophy. Was Green worth my time? Would he be worth Lewis? Green had tipped off my uncle in a few cases. I wondered if that was enough to warrant my protection. Before I could think past my headache, he threw a bill in my lap. Keep the C note as a retainer, and don't worry about getting in touch. I'll find you later for a chat. He turned down the hallway, and I let him go. If he was willing to give me $100 with no commitment, I wouldn't stop him. I turned back to the apartment, still confused about the whole story. My headache wasn't helping either. Whenever I lacked clarity, a trip of Southern coffee was usually the cure. Okay, sorry, I had to close the door. There's so much noise out there. What am I gonna do now? Let's put the notes. Connor Green had just given me a case that involved his bootlegging. I still wasn't sure if he'd be worth any of my time. I decided to head to Southern Coffee and consult with Frankie. Got a threatening letter, has a new bootlegging scheme, suspects Redstone Stable. Where do I go to leave? Oh, I'm out at a gold plate on the outside that read, P.C. Malone, Private Investigator. There was only one place I needed to go to clear my head. Southern Coffee. Southern Coffee was a basement dive. It wasn't modern, hip, or ever busy. And it was my favorite place to down some pain, especially in the company of the best bartender in the city. I gave my address and slouched in the back seat of the taxi cab. I thought a good way to pass the journey might be a chat with the driver. Yeah, let's talk. He was young, not a teenager, but not far off. The redness in his face and a mean scowl told me he was angry. Don't much like driving taxi cabs? I offered. He looked quizzically at me, though, the review before understanding what I meant. No, lady, I like it right enough. Just some bozo, for you were in here, was giving me hell 'cause I look like the boy his daughter's going with. Went off about how my generation was ruining America. I scumbag don't know jack. That sounds like you know. I wasn't much into it. That sounds like you know. Sounds like you know more, I asked. I'm no genius, he replied, but you talk to anyone from the last century, they'll tear off your ear for just being young. How'd they get so high, I'd wonder, given the world in the 1890s, like a smooth running roadster? Then what they do? Bash it on every curb in sight? Their greed, their war, their politics? Now they're giving us ruined clunker and they're mad at our manners when we grab the keys. I agree. I agreed with him. The Great War was the hardest fought, at home and aboard, I said. The old man who put us there had some nerve. He replied hostily, and after those years, they tell us to get in line. It's a bum deal to me, sister. We're in the information age, and the news of the world is crap. They're just angry we can see their folly. The taxi cab rolled to my stop. Anyhow, the driver said, thanks for letting me blow off steam. Have a nice day, miss. I opened the car door, and stepped out. Southern Coffee was an automat diner. I don't know why I immediately went back into the southern accent. Ethel Burgess and lone waitress, as friendly to help with any inquiry. Of course, if you winked at her right, she'd show you the way to the downstairs toilet, where Frankie played bathroom attendant. Oh? Southern Coffee had the distinct feeling of home. The familiar smell of mold in the old basement was enough to put a grin on my face. Frankie had a bond with that old shaker at the end of the bar. I was surprised he hadn't named it. He could sling a mean drink, though he'd only use the good liquor if he liked you. Frankie liked me. The one stairs led to the outside. No, I don't want to leave yet. The bar stairs were crooked and worn. My usual one was in the center of the room. I could sit on it for hours if Frankie had a yarn to spin. Of course, the sauce helped keep me in place, too. Frankie kept a collection of pre-prohibited bottles of a shelf behind the counter. Their shapes and colors were far more alluring than the opaque jugs of modern swill. This label had a poem on it. Fill full your cups. Feel no distress. At all our great thoughts, shrinking less. We'll do a good deed nevertheless. I grabbed the wine bottle on the bar and examined its label. It's featuring a picture of grapes and the words sacramental use only. Frankie looked at me with a spark in his eye. Go ahead, he said. Give it a swig. Sure. I grabbed the half-empty glass and had been next to the bottle and swirled some of its contents between my gums. A bit spicy, ain't it? Frankie says. I shook my head too much. He scoffed and grabbed the bottle from me, turning it through his hands. I suppose you only like the bootleg paint. Well, I'll have you know that Rabbins charge more than a nickel for this beauty. Only this type of Napa wine is made from the Zinfandel grape. It has a unique aroma. I've been trying to learn more about wine. Seemed everyone knew their stuff but me. I noted that Frankie had said about the origin of the grape as he set the bottle back on the bar. Since when do you know grapes? I chilled. Frankie let out a bellied laugh. Some of these grapes are older than you, Malone, and I'd known about them since I was a small tot. It's why I'm so good at my job, you know. Frankie sighed. Too bad more folks can't taste them. That woman's Lee is the devil. The woman's Christian temperature. Aren't you done with the sauce? I asked. Sure, he said. I'm dry now, but I'm not done slinging it. He grabbed a bottle and twirled it through his hand and with surprising deft. And I've no right to stop others either. He put the bottle down, took a breath, and then said in a calm tone, "Those women don't understand. Prohibition doesn't make anyone stop. It just makes them a criminal." Take a seat, he said. I'll make you something else. He was a big fella. He'd been a decent pitcher. He was a fantastic I'm actually going to leave this right here. I know this is a weird place to leave it, but why not? So, if you haven't already, subscribe to my channel. If you like this video, hit the like button. And if you'd like to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, I'll put the links in the description below. Until next time, my scaredy cats. Bye-bye!